The first snow came earlier than anyone expected, sweeping across the frozen peaks like a warning. In the high mountains, a young boy stood alone on a rocky ridge, his eyes fixed on a rough patch of earth where most people would never think to build. Around him, the village down the slope was already bustling with activity, people securing doors, stacking firewood, and preparing for the cold. But he ignored them. He had his own plan, one that made no sense to anyone else. While the villagers rushed to survive, he began digging into the mountain itself, carving a small hollow in the rock. The work was slow and exhausting, but he moved with calm precision, measuring each cut, lining stones, and arranging logs in unusual ways. People noticed him immediately. From the village, voices carried up the mountain, full of laughter and disbelief. "He's crazy," someone said, shaking their head. "Who builds a cave in the snow?" another shouted. Others gathered, pointing and whispering, convinced that this boy had lost his mind. They had their warm homes, their sturdy roofs, their fires that crackled and roared. What could he possibly gain by working in the freezing wind, carving a strange cabin into the mountain, and leaving empty spaces no one could understand? But the boy ignored them. He worked steadily every day, rising with the sun and stopping only when the light faded. He cut logs thinner than normal, stacking them in layers that seemed random to anyone watching. Some villagers approached to see what he was doing, curious despite themselves, but each time they left more confused than before. There were extra roofs, one over the other, with a small air gap between them. At first, it seemed like a mistake, a dangerous flaw, but he moved carefully, testing the structure, adjusting logs, packing earth in the cracks. He dug tiny vents, narrow channels through the walls, which made no sense to the observer. As snow began to pile on the mountainside, villagers peered from their windows. The boy's cabin seemed smaller under the white blanket, almost invisible. Some ventured closer, curiosity overcoming caution, but they couldn't make sense of it. The extra roof, the hidden chambers, the vents that looked like mistakes, they all defied logic. And then, as if to mock the watchers, the wind grew stronger. Snow whipped across the mountains, thick and blinding, the kind of snowstorm that could bury a person in minutes. Trees bent under the weight, roofs creaked, fires struggled to keep burning. Yet the boy kept working inside his cabin, unseen, unbothered by the chaos outside. The villagers began to worry. "Is he even alive?" one whispered. No smoke. No sign of movement. He could be trapped under his own roof. Others shook their heads, too afraid to climb the mountain. They returned to their homes, watching from a distance, certain the storm would finish what they assumed the boy had started. Some even placed small bets. Who would give up first, the boy or the winter? But as the storm raged through the night, a strange thought began to settle among them. The cabin stayed upright, unbroken. Snow piled on top, but it didn't collapse. The air gaps between the roofs, which seemed like mistakes, prevented the weight from crushing the logs. The vents, which looked pointless, kept the inside dry. Somehow, against everything they had predicted, the boy's shelter endured. Night after night, the storm continued, pounding the mountains. Village roofs groaned, fences snapped, paths disappeared under ice. Fires were lit constantly, but even indoors, warmth was hard to maintain. Yet above it all, the boy moved quietly through his cabin, checking hidden compartments, stacking wood in dry storage, testing traps for water, making sure everything stayed balanced. No one knew how he survived without smoke or lights, without anyone to bring food or help. And yet, he did. By the third night, the villagers' disbelief was turning into unease. They whispered about him, about the impossible cabin that seemed untouched by the storm. Some began to ask questions they had never asked before. "Maybe he knows something we don't," one said quietly. Others shook their heads, refusing to believe it. But even as they argued, the boys' cabin stood strong under the heavy snow. It didn't scream for attention, didn't cry for help. It simply endured, calm and silent like a hidden heart of the mountain itself. And then, as the storm reached its fiercest point, a new fear crept into the village. Dark clouds loomed even higher, snow drifted unpredictably, and the wind carried the sound of distant avalanches. People hurried indoors, locking doors, hoping the storm would pass. But one question lingered in every mind: had the boy built a shelter, or had he built his own frozen tomb? They could not see him, could not hear him. All they could do was watch the snow and wait, their laughter of just days ago replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Above the village, the boy remained inside his cabin, calm and focused, knowing that every strange design, every unusual roof, every hidden vent, had a purpose. The storm could rage. The wind could howl. Snow could pile higher than anyone dared imagine. It did not matter. The mountain boy had already built more than a shelter. He had built a secret that even the fiercest winter could not break. And as the village below slept fitfully, terrified of the mountain, a quiet truth settled in the air. The boy's plan was working, even if no one yet understood how. The first part of the winter had begun, and the question hung over the mountain like ice. Would the mountain boy survive what no one else could, or had he gambled too far in the shadow of the storm? The storm did not stop. Not for a moment. Snow poured like thick white paint, covering the mountain in a blanket so heavy it crushed trees and blocked paths. The wind screamed through the peaks, rattling even the strongest buildings in the village below. Fires crackled and smoked in every home, but even indoors, warmth struggled to reach the people. Panic spread as snow drifted higher than anyone had seen in decades. And still, the mountain boy remained in his strange cabin, silent, unseen, moving like a shadow inside his carefully built shelter. For the villagers, worry quickly turned into fear. They watched from their windows, eyes straining through the blinding snowfall, but they could not see the boy's cabin. Its shape was hidden under the white weight of snow, a small bump in the landscape that seemed almost magical. No smoke, no lights, nothing. "He won't last," someone whispered, voice shaking. "The mountain will take him." Others tried to convince themselves he had simply run out of food or warmth. But as hours passed and the storm intensified, they noticed something impossible. The snow above his cabin seemed untouched, undisturbed. While roofs bent, walls cracked, and fences collapsed under the weight of ice, the boy's cabin remained firm, hidden, and calm. Inside, warmth had gathered. The clever design of his cabin, with double roofs and hidden vents, trapped air and kept the cold out. Earth-packed walls held heat like a shield. Snow piled high above, but instead of crushing the structure, it acted as insulation, pressing gently without threatening the logs. Tiny hidden chambers stored wood for food, and supplies, allowing him to rotate his resources without stepping outside into the storm. Every vent, every crack, every strange design that had seemed like a mistake now revealed its purpose. Cold could reach the outside of the cabin, but inside it could not touch him. The boy worked steadily. He rotated firewood, moving dry logs to the hearth and keeping wet snow far from the flames. He melted snow for water, using heat carefully captured between the roof layers. He checked hidden compartments, making sure food was safe, and adjusted vents to release moisture without losing warmth. Outside, the wind raged, but he moved calmly through his cabin, focused and precise. Every decision was deliberate. Every strange feature that had puzzled the villagers now made perfect sense. The villagers began to feel something new, doubt. Their laughter from before had disappeared. They whispered in fear and curiosity, watching the cabin from the village below. "Maybe he knows something we don't," one said quietly. Another shook their head. "No, it's impossible. Snow will crush him. He can't survive this." Yet the cabin stood, firm and silent beneath the mountain snow, proving them wrong in the most subtle way. On the third day, the blizzard grew even more violent. The wind clawed across the peaks, carrying ice and snow that moved like living things. Trees bent to the breaking point, and the village homes groaned under the weight. Avalanches thundered in the distance, terrifying even the bravest villagers. People huddled inside, checking windows and doors again and again, fearing the worst. Rumors spread quickly. "He's gone," one said. "The mountain swallowed him," said another. Yet high above them, the boy continued his quiet work. A shift in the snow caught the villagers' eyes. At first, it was subtle, almost impossible to notice through the blizzard. Then, slowly, tiny lines began to appear in the snow around his cabin. It was faint, like smoke, but not smoke. Warm air escaped from somewhere inside, melting the top layer of snow. The villagers stared, disbelief written across every face. "How?" someone breathed. "It's impossible. He should be frozen." But the lines grew longer, small streams of melted snow revealing that something alive remained beneath the mountain's icy grip. Inside the cabin, the mountain boy moved calmly. He had expected this storm, prepared for it with patience and planning. The double roofs trapped heat. The vents released moisture without letting cold in. The snow itself acted as a shield. He rotated supplies, monitored the hidden chambers, and used every trick he had designed months earlier. Nothing was wasted. Every odd feature, every strange choice he had made now proved vital. He had not only survived, he had mastered the storm. The village people grew desperate. Some tried to climb the mountain to check, but the wind was too strong, visibility almost zero. Others argued among themselves, unsure whether to go or stay. Every step outside meant risking being trapped in snow or swept away by an avalanche. Yet all they could do was watch the tiny signs, the faint melting lines, the mysterious absence of damage, the stubborn presence of the cabin under snow. It was almost as if the mountain itself protected him. Hours passed. Night fell, and the storm continued to rage. The villagers lit more fires, checking their supplies, whispering stories of men who had disappeared in the mountains before. Yet none could sleep. The boys' cabin became a ghostly presence in their minds. A question hovered over the village: how could someone so young survive when seasoned adults struggled to protect themselves? How could a strange, half-buried cabin endure what they feared most? Then came the real test. A massive avalanche broke loose higher up the slope. Snow, ice, and rocks thundered down, smashing trees and covering paths. The villagers feared that it would reach the boy's cabin, sweeping him away. They held their breath as the roar approached. But when the snow finally settled, there was no collapse, no damage. The cabin remained, perfectly intact, hidden beneath its blanket of snow. Not a single log had shifted. The boy had predicted the avalanche, built the cabin in a safe spot, reinforced weak areas, and used the mountain itself as a shield. The villagers were stunned. Fear and curiosity battled within them. Some felt shame for doubting him. Others began to feel awe, a mixture of respect and envy. They realized that this boy, who had seemed foolish, had done something no adult could have imagined. The storm continued, relentless, but the boys' cabin remained a quiet, unshakable sanctuary. Even as winds whipped snow across the peaks, melting lines continued to appear on the roof, showing that warmth persisted inside. For the mountain boy, it was just another day. He had expected this. He had planned every detail, every vent, every hidden space. He moved with calm efficiency, conserving energy, rotating wood, melting snow, and preparing for what could come next. He was not afraid. Outside, the world raged, a storm designed to break the unprepared. Inside, he thrived, proving that patience, intelligence, and preparation mattered more than strength or size. And for the villagers, the lesson began to settle in. Their laughter of weeks ago had vanished. Instead, awe mixed with fear as they watched the impossible cabin endure storm after storm. A single thought haunted them: the boy might not just survive. He might outlast them all. As night deepened and the blizzard showed no sign of stopping, the villagers returned to their homes, worried and exhausted. They whispered to one another, unable to sleep. "He's alive, somehow," one said. "And he's winning," said another. No one dared approach. The cabin remained hidden, mysterious, and strangely alive beneath the mountain snow. It was no longer a joke. It was a warning. The storm raged on, and the mountain boy continued quietly, calmly, perfectly prepared. Every strange choice he had made now proved its worth. The snow could fall, the wind could scream, and the avalanche could thunder, but none of it mattered. The boy had built a secret that even the fiercest winter could not touch. And far below, the villagers could only watch in silence, hearts pounding, knowing that when the storm finally ended, the truth of the cabin, and of the boy, would change everything. The storm finally began to ease, though snow still covered the mountain like a thick white blanket. From the village below, people slowly emerged, eyes wide, hearts pounding. They had watched for days as the blizzard raged, as roofs bent, trees snapped, and avalanches roared. But now, as the wind softened and clouds parted slightly, they saw something impossible: a small outline under the snow, a cabin that had survived the worst winter in decades. No one could believe it. Not the elders, not the hunters, not the men who had worked the land their whole lives. Driven by curiosity and fear, a group of villagers climbed the mountain. Their boots sank into deep snow. Every step was heavy and uncertain, each gust of wind threatening to push them back. They approached the cabin cautiously, scanning for signs of collapse, for smoke, for any clue that the boy had survived. At first, there was nothing. The cabin appeared small, almost swallowed by snow, but perfectly intact. Roofs had not cracked, walls had not bowed, and hidden vents were barely visible, releasing faint trails of warm air. The villagers froze, unsure what to do. Then a sound startled them. A soft, deliberate knocking came from the side of the cabin. Not loud, not panicked, but confident, calm, purposeful. The villagers exchanged shocked glances. Could it really be him? After all the storms, the wind, the avalanches, the snow, the boy was still alive. They dug through the snow to clear the entrance, hearts pounding. And there he was, emerging from a side tunnel no one had noticed before. His face was calm, tired, but steady. Snow clung to his boots, his coat, and hair, but he seemed untouched by exhaustion or fear. The villagers could hardly speak. Their disbelief hung in the air, heavy and cold. How, one of them finally managed to ask. The boy looked around, then motioned for them to come closer. "Come inside," he said simply. Inside the cabin, the warmth was almost unbelievable. The walls glowed with heat, the fire burned steadily, and everything was dry, perfectly arranged. Extra roofs had trapped layers of warm air, hidden vents balanced moisture, and the snow outside acted as a natural insulator. Every unusual feature, every strange design they had laughed at before, now revealed its purpose. The boy explained, calmly and clearly, without pride. The wind moves fast. The cold is strong, but the mountain itself is stronger if you work with it. The snow protects, the earth holds heat, and the air trapped between layers keeps the cold out. Every room, every vent, every roof was built to survive winter, not to be seen. The villagers listened, amazed, realizing that they had been so focused on what looked strange that they had missed the truth. He had always been prepared. Outside, the blizzard's aftermath was still visible. Trees were broken, paths blocked, fences flattened, but the cabin stood untouched. Avalanches had passed, winds had screamed, and snow had piled higher than any roof in the village. Yet nothing inside had been disturbed. The boy had anticipated every challenge, every twist of winter, every danger that could have destroyed him. He had not only survived but thrived. The villagers began to understand the scale of what he had done. While they had focused on immediate solutions, fires, heavy roofs, constant effort, the mountain boy had thought long-term. He had built patience, intelligence, and observation into every corner of his shelter. No adult, no experienced villager, could have imagined the combination of elements that made this small cabin a fortress of survival. It wasn't brute strength, or luck, or firepower that kept him alive. It was his understanding of the mountain, the snow, and the cold. Some villagers felt shame. They had mocked him, doubted him, and dismissed him. Others felt awe, a quiet respect that left them speechless. They could see now that the boy was not strange. He was not foolish. He was simply thinking differently, acting ahead, and planning with knowledge no one else had considered. His survival was not an accident, it was deliberate, precise, and brilliant. The boy did not scold or boast. He led the villagers inside, showing them hidden storage rooms, cleverly built channels that managed water, and vents that controlled airflow. He demonstrated how snow on the roof acted as insulation, how double layers trapped warmth, and how the cabin's orientation reduced wind pressure. They could see, firsthand, why every odd detail had mattered. They realized that the boy's strange, confusing choices were actually genius solutions to problems they had never understood. Winter continued around them, harsh and unforgiving, but now the villagers felt a shift in themselves. They learned from the boy's calm, precise movements. They began to understand that survival was not about rushing, not about fighting blindly, not about copying old methods. It was about patience, observation, planning, and respect for the mountain. They watched as he rotated firewood, checked hidden chambers, and maintained his small water supply, realizing that what had seemed like a strange obsession was actually careful mastery. The days passed, and the village struggled through remaining snow and cold. Homes leaked, fires died, and supplies ran low. Many wished they had followed the boy's example, that they had listened instead of laughing. Yet the mountain boy continued to thrive. His cabin became more than a shelter, it became a symbol. People whispered about it, about him, about the courage and intelligence it took to survive where others could not. By spring, when the storms finally ended, the snow began to melt, and the sun returned, the village slowly descended from the mountain. They approached the cabin again, this time not with skepticism or fear, but with admiration. The boy had proven that preparation and understanding mattered more than luck or strength. He had been one step ahead all along. Every odd roof, every hidden vent, every confusing construction choice had been purposeful. And when they stepped inside, they understood something deeper. The boy had not built the cabin to show off, to prove them wrong, or to make them feel small. He had built it to survive, to endure, to respect the mountain while finding a way to live safely within it. His intelligence, patience, and careful planning had turned what seemed impossible into reality. The villagers left with a new respect, carrying the lesson forward. They told stories of the boy who had outsmarted the mountain, the one who had survived a storm that could have destroyed anyone else. And although they returned to their homes, warm fires, and simple routines, the boy's secret cabin remained on the mountain, a hidden fortress, proof that courage alone was not enough, preparation and wisdom were what truly endured. The mountain boy stood at the cabin entrance, looking over the slope. The sun glinted on snow and ice, revealing the jagged beauty of the peaks. He had survived winter, yes, but more than that, he had mastered it in a way no one else could. And in that quiet moment, it became clear, the boy had never been behind, never been foolish, never been unprepared. He had simply been thinking ahead, living in a way the world had not yet understood. The lesson of the mountain was now clear to all who had watched. Cleverness and patience can turn impossible situations into survival. The boy's quiet brilliance had saved him, and in doing so, inspired everyone who had once doubted him. By the end of the storm, there was no question left. The mountain boy's cabin was not just a place to survive, it was proof that preparation, intelligence, and foresight could conquer even the harshest winter.